There is something quietly different about Generation X parents. They are not the loudest in the room. They do not constantly broadcast their sacrifices. They rarely announce their philosophy. Yet beneath their calm, sometimes tired expressions, there is a complex, psychological story unfolding, one shaped by independence, uncertainty, and a deep desire to do things differently. Generation X grew up in a world that was shifting fast. Divorce rates were rising. Both parents were increasingly working. Economic stability felt less guaranteed than it had for their parents. Many of them came home to empty houses, made their own snacks, and entertained themselves until dinner. They were not micromanaged. They were not constantly supervised. They learned early that if something needed to be done, they would probably have to do it themselves. That early independence built resilience. It built problem-solving skills. It built emotional armor. But it also built distance. When you spend your childhood figuring things out alone, you don't just become capable, you become cautious. You learn not to expect too much help. You learn to manage disappointment quietly. And over time, that self-reliance becomes part of your identity. Now, fast forward, the same children who once unlocked their own front doors are raising kids in a completely different world. A world of smartphones, constant comparison, online judgment, and 24-hour connectivity. And something interesting happens psychologically when people who were raised independently become parents. They don't simply repeat what they experienced. They analyze it. Gen X parents are reflective. They think about how they were raised. They remember the strengths, the freedom, the creativity, the ability to handle boredom. But they also remember the silence, the feeling of not always being seen, the moments when they wished someone would notice they were struggling. And so, when they become parents, they carry two competing instincts. One instinct says, let them figure it out. The other whispers, but don't let them feel alone. This tension defines much of their parenting style. Unlike the stereotype of overly controlling parents, many Gen X moms and dads give their children room to breathe. They don't need to monitor every text message or hover at every social interaction. They believe struggle builds character because struggle built them. But here's the key difference. They don't disappear when things truly matter. If a serious issue arises, bullying, mental health struggles, academic crises, they show up fiercely. Not loudly, not dramatically, but decisively. It is almost as if their own childhood loneliness becomes fuel for a quiet promise. My child will not navigate this alone. Psychologists often describe healthy parenting as a balance between warmth and structure. Too much control without empathy creates fear. Too much warmth without boundaries creates instability. What makes Gen X parents interesting is how consciously they try to balance these forces. They want their children to feel emotionally safe, something they may not have fully experienced. But they also want them to be capable, because they know the world does not guarantee safety. Another powerful influence on Gen X parenting is economic memory. This generation witnessed recessions, corporate layoffs, and the fading promise of lifelong job security. They learned early that stability can vanish. As a result, they don't raise their children with unrealistic promises of certainty. Instead, they emphasize adaptability. You'll often hear Gen X parents say things like, have a backup plan, or learn multiple skills. That mindset isn't fear-based. They are preparing their children for unpredictability, not because they expect failure, but because they understand volatility. At the same time, technology has complicated everything. Gen 10 is the only generation that fully remembers life before the internet and life after it. They know what it feels like to be unreachable. They remember boredom, the kind that forces imagination. They remember mistakes fading with time instead of living permanently online. So when they limit screen time or question social media, it's not ignorance, it's contrast. They have lived in two realities. They understand the benefits of connection, but also recognize the cost of constant exposure. There is also a quiet exhaustion that many Gen X parents carry. They are often caring for aging parents while raising children. They are managing careers that may feel stagnant. They are navigating financial pressure in a world that seems increasingly expensive and unstable. They are, in many ways, the bridge generation, translating between older values and newer expectations. Their own parents may believe they are too soft. Their children may think they are too strict, but from the inside, they are simply trying to combine resilience with empathy. One of the most fascinating traits of Generation X parents is their comfort with imperfection. Because they were not constantly validated as children, they don't obsess as much over appearing perfect now. They don't need every parenting decision to be applauded publicly. They trust their internal compass more than external opinion. This means they are often less performative. They might not post every achievement online. They might not compare developmental milestones with other parents. They understand that childhood is not a competition, it is a process. And perhaps most importantly, they are willing to let their children fail, but not collapse. There is a difference. Failure teaches, collapse isolates. Gen X parents are comfortable with the first, but protective against the second. They will let their teenager handle a tough conversation. They will allow natural consequences. But if emotional damage becomes too heavy, they step in not to control, but to support. In many ways, they are attempting something subtle but profound, breaking cycles without rejecting their past entirely. They keep the independence they valued. They keep the resilience they earned. But they add presence. They answer late-night calls. They listen more intentionally. They try to say the words they didn't always hear growing up. And maybe that is a quiet evolution of parenting across generations. It is rarely dramatic. It rarely makes headlines, but it changes homes. Generation X may not fit neatly into stereotypes. They are not the strict authoritarian parents of the past, nor the hyper-curated digital parents of today. They are somewhat in between, shaped by solitude, strengthened by uncertainty, and motivated by memory. Their parenting is not about control. It is not about image. It is not about proving anything. It is about balance. About raising children who feel both secure and capable. About making sure independence does not mean invisibility. And perhaps, at its core, it is about this simple commitment. I know what it felt like to grow up strong but unseen. You will grow up strong and seen.